Last year, I stated that the iPhone XR was the phone that most iPhone users should buy, so it should come as no surprise that the follow-up to the XR, the iPhone 11, comes with a similar recommendation. The iPhone 11 is, for all intents and purposes, a more powerful and more feature-filled iPhone XR. Its flagship feature, a second camera with an ultra-wide focal length, is a noteworthy upgrade for camera enthusiasts, and its $699 starting price, which is $50 cheaper than its predecessor, is a welcome change as well. Yet outside of some substantial camera upgrades, the remainder of the enhancements that come with the iPhone 11 don't necessarily warrant an upgrade if you already own an iPhone XR. Watch our hands-on video review for the details. 9to5Mac on YouTube is sponsored by our friends at Kadabi. Of course, Kadabi makes a variety of iPhone 11 cases like this clear case that gives you direct access to your iPhone 11's buttons. There's also the Veil, which is super lightweight but still protects your iPhone to a high degree. And the Synthesis protects your phone but lets you still view the Apple logo beneath. But by far my favorite case is the Sheath, which has a sleek and minimalist design with a precision micro-etched matte texture for enhanced grip and feel. It's comprised of Shocklite, a proprietary polymer with outstanding shock absorption. It's been drop tested up to 6.6 feet and features raised edges that protect the camera and the display. Click the link in the description to get 30% off Kadabi Sheath for iPhone 11 with code 9to5Toys2019. Thanks for watching 9to5Mac. Be sure to thumbs up, click the subscribe button, and then enable notifications with the bell icon so you won't miss any upcoming videos. The iPhone 11 unboxing experience is similar to last year's iPhone XR, except that you'll find that the rear of the phone is the first thing you see when opening the box. Inside, you'll still find the same old tired 5-watt power adapter, a lightning to USB-A cable, and a pair of EarPods wired earphones with inline remote control. One of the most notable things about the iPhone XR was its vivid color selection, and the iPhone 11 continues in this trend. You'll notice that the coral and blue color options have been replaced with new purple and green colors, which I'm a big fan of. As someone who actually prefers the iPhone 11 Pro, I'm sort of jealous that the iPhone 11 gets all these beautiful colors. It's definitely one of my favorite things about the baseline iPhone. Like its predecessor, the rear of the iPhone 11 is comprised of glossy glass, but you get a new rectangular camera housing with a matte glass exterior this time. You'll find the inverse setup on the 11 Pro, which features a matte glass back cover and a shiny glass rectangular camera module. I actually think the 11 Pro looks much better with its matte rear cover. It just looks more premium in my opinion. Like last year's budget-minded iPhone, the band that wraps around the perimeter of the iPhone 11 is comprised of color-matched aluminum, while the higher-end model enjoys a much better looking and more durable stainless steel band. In the end, there are elements from both phones that I enjoy, but I think most people will be happy with the design of the iPhone 11, even if its design feels less premium than the iPhone 11 Pro. Now let's talk about the cameras, because there's no beating around the bush here. The cameras are the most important feature of both new iPhones. Basically, Apple added one additional camera to both the iPhone 11 and the iPhone 11 Pro. The baseline iPhone 11 gains a new ultra-wide camera, which allows users to shoot landscape outdoor photography without having to physically move back to capture the entire scene. The iPhone 11 ultra-wide camera is great for outdoor environments with lots of light, but not so good for low-light shooting. When you're shooting outdoors, you'll likely be amazed by the difference that the 13mm ultra-wide focal length makes over the standard 26mm wide focal length. Safe to say is that it makes shooting landscapes and architecture incredibly fun. On the other hand, the ultra-wide camera is considerably less compelling for shooting indoors or shooting dimly lit environments. But given its relatively slow f2.4 aperture and its outright lack of OIS, that should go without saying. The standard wide-angle camera, however, is the heavy lifter. It's the jack-of-all-trades camera and features OIS and a fast f1.8 aperture, and that makes it much more ideal for low-light photography. Even better is the fact that this year's iPhone 11 features a new wide-angle sensor with 100% focused pixels, which again helps with low light and faster focus. Now, what you will not find on the iPhone 11 is a telephoto lens, so that's kind of a bummer if you're upgrading from something like the iPhone XS to an iPhone 11 or the iPhone X to the iPhone 11, as both of those had telephoto lenses built in. Granted, neither of those phones had ultra-wide lenses either, so it's sort of of a trade-off. You have to decide which one you are going to use more. But I think by far the ultra-wide focal length is the more desirable and the more useful in day-to-day usage. That being said, when I was just using the iPhone 11 exclusively, I did miss that telephoto lens. With its ability to get up close and personal with the subjects, it gives you better bokeh, and it just feels like more feature complete on the iPhone 11 Pro. Having that telephoto lens gives you higher quality zoom ability, and coupled with the ultra wide and wide angle lenses, it feels like a more complete, well-rounded solution for serious videographers and photographers. If low-light photography seems like a running theme, that's because it is. One of the flagship iPhone 11 features is its inclusion of night mode, a direct response to Google's Night Sight feature for shooting low-light photography on the Google Pixel series of phones. Now, it's good to note that night mode is more than just a long exposure, although the UI makes it seem as if it were all that easy. In actuality, night mode combines the aforementioned long exposure with bits of machine learning. By using a long exposure combined with machine learning enhancements, night mode allows users to capture low-light photos with less noise and more detail than on previous iPhones. It does so by taking multiple shots and combining those shots into a single photo. It automatically omits parts of the photo that have too much blur while it hangs on to sharper areas. This, coupled with auto-adjusting for contrast, color, and noise reduction, happens almost instantly, and it results in a much better looking low-light photo than what would be possible with just the camera on its own. My biggest takeaway from night mode is that while it's impressive, it's not magic. In other words, you still need a source of light for night mode to work properly, and you'll still need to hold your iPhone as still as possible so that it can capture photos using a longer exposure than you would normally associate with smartphone photography. In the end, night mode can produce some really fantastic shots both indoors and outdoors, but it can also result in shots that are virtually unusable. Optically speaking, a smartphone will never be able to compete with the standalone camera because generally speaking, smartphones come with fixed apertures and fixed lenses with fixed focal lengths, but smartphones can also leverage advantages that traditional cameras can't do as easily, such as computational photography, and the iPhone 11, thanks to the A13 Bionic chip, has that in spades. Of course, the iPhone 11 Pro does the best job of showcasing this given its 3-camera setup, but the iPhone 11 is no slouch either. For example, the new stock camera app makes switching between multiple lenses feel as if there was an actual zoom lens with an adjustable focal length strapped to the back of your iPhone. Through software design and computational photography, the camera app does an outstanding job of selling the idea that there is a single lens instead of 2 different lenses with 2 different camera sensors. Instead, the camera app UI makes it so that the user has a camera that happens to be capable of zooming in and out on a whim, and although there are indications that there are 2 different systems working together, Apple does a great job of hiding that fact in context. In its synopsis of the A13 Bionic, Apple indicates that it's not all about the raw power per se, but it's the way that it's able to orchestrate it all to make 2 cameras, or 3 in the case of the iPhone 11 Pro, operate as if they were one. iPhone 11 engineers went above and beyond to calibrate each camera for white balance and exposure, and then after pairing the cameras together, they calibrated them again for module alignment. And while Apple did a commendable job with achieving consistency in color across each camera, it's not completely invisible to the discerning eye. Despite the calibration and the best efforts to match the 2 cameras together, an eagle-eyed user can tell when the camera shifts between lenses, as I noticed subtle color changes in the viewfinder when doing so. For example, when viewing the wide-angle camera, the viewfinder will display the outside of frame area from the ultra-wide camera where appropriate, and that's cool in and of itself. But if you look closely, you can tell that both of these camera views are stitched together via software, as there's a noticeable tearing that occurs in the area where the 2 pipelines meet. Of course, none of that really affects usability, but some users may find it a little distracting. When capturing this outside of frame data, users can then venture into the Photos app editing interface to adjust the boundaries of the photo in such a way to pull in additional content where beneficial, and the iPhone 11 will automatically determine whether it captures this data or not. And if enabled, iOS 13 can be set to automatically make adjustments using this additional camera data. For instance, if it notices that you cut off a face in a frame, an auto adjustment might be made to ensure that the user appears in the photo unobscured. Computationally speaking, there are 2 additional areas where the iPhone 11 camera excels over its predecessors. Of course, I'm talking about Smart HDR and Deep Fusion. Smart HDR was featured on last year's crop of iPhones, but with the iPhone 11, it's been enhanced. This year, Apple says that faces are intelligently relit and detail is fine-tuned automatically to improve highlight and shadow detail on the fly. I was able to test Smart HDR in a few limited yet challenging circumstances, and I came away impressed with the results just like last year. Smart HDR greatly enhances dynamic range in photos that would have been impossible to accurately capture just a few years back. And although it's in beta still, Deep Fusion is a feature that performs pixel by pixel processing of photos to optimize for textures, details, and noise throughout the entire composition. I used it to take a few pictures of my cat, a sweater, flowers, and other subjects with lots of textures, and I could immediately tell the difference between the regular photo and a photo assisted by Deep Fusion. Even at this early beta stage, the results have been quite impressive. Now it's funny, but we've gotten this far and we haven't even mentioned the front-facing true depth camera enhancements, because that has a significant upgrade as well. First of all, it goes from a 7 megapixel sensor on the iPhone XR to a 12 megapixel sensor on the iPhone 11. That's going to make a big difference. Now, a more subtle detail is the fact that it's running at a wider native focal length. It's now more primed for things like group selfie photos than before, and thanks to the changes, it's even able to perform a faux zoom out, which jumps from the default digital zoom view to the native focal view. And this happens automatically when you place your phone in landscape mode. And for the very first time, I have to mention that users, yes, can take slow motion selfies with the true depth camera, which opens up a very wide variety of creative possibilities. And then of course there is portrait mode. Now, unlike last year's iPhone XR, the iPhone 11 can actually capture portrait photos of animals and inanimate objects thanks to its dual camera array. iOS 13 also brings enhancements to the table like a new high key light mono effect coupled with the ability to adjust lighting position via a handy portrait lighting control slider. And of course, we couldn't forget video, because it too has received significant upgrades on the iPhone 11. Now all three cameras can shoot 4K video up to 60 frames per second, yes, including the true depth front-facing camera. But the two most impressive new video features are the extended dynamic range at 4K 60 frames per second and the cinematic video stabilization at 4K 60 frames per second. Extended dynamic range at 60 frames per second means that the camera is actually taking video at 120 frames per second and combining two frames, a normal exposure frame and a short exposure frame, to create a single frame. Now granted, the final result is still just 60 frames per second, but there aren't too many cameras under $15,000 that shoot 4K at 120 frames per second, which this technically does, putting the power of the A13 Bionic into perspective. Now, there are additional video-centric improvements for the iPhone 11, including a new quick take video feature that lets you capture videos while in photo mode on the camera app. Just beware that quick take videos should not supplant normal videos, because they are capped at 30 frames per second and feature a 4:3 aspect ratio with lesser resolution than 4K. And then there's audio zoom, which is fun to mess around with, but sort of feels a little bit Samsungian in nature. It increases the volume of the audio of the subject that you're capturing when you zoom in on it, so it increases the perception that you've gotten physically closer to the object that you're shooting via a clever usage of the microphone that resides next to the square camera housing. Overall, the iPhone 11 camera is just downright impressive. It is doubtful that smartphone cameras will ever be able to compete with dedicated systems as far as pure optics are concerned, but the iPhone 11 is a good example of working with the tools and abilities that you have at your disposal, maximizing your strengths and minimizing your weaknesses. Now, in case you haven't noticed, this has been an extremely camera-heavy review, and that's because there really isn't that huge of a gulf between the iPhone XR and the iPhone 11 with regard to anything else. I mean, sure, the A13 Bionic is quite a bit faster than its predecessor. It's also a little bit more efficient. You get an extra hour of battery life as a result. And there are other improvements like better water resistance, spatial audio for faux surround sound, and networking enhancements like support for Wi-Fi 6, for instance. There's also that fancy new Apple U1 ultra wideband chip that can make your iPhone spatially aware in relation to other U1 enabled devices. Now, that feature is still very limited and in its infancy, and there's really nothing that uses it right now outside of AirDrop in iOS 13. So all these features, while they're certainly worthy of bullet points, aren't compelling enough to work as key differentiating features when compared to the iPhone XR. Even things like speed enhancements to Face ID are largely made possible by iOS 13, which means that even the iPhone XR received the same speed boost for Face ID. So in the end, the two most compelling features about the iPhone 11 are its starting price at just $699 for the 64GB model and its camera capabilities, headlined by the new ultra-wide camera. The iPhone 11 is a great value for all that it offers in the way of features. It gives users almost everything provided by the iPhone 11 Pro, including the same A13 Bionic system on a chip at a much more digestible price point. That said, if the new camera features don't sound exciting to you, then you should probably hold off on upgrading if you're coming from an iPhone XR, or maybe even an iPhone 8 or iPhone 10. But if you've been pining for an ultra-wide camera, better low-light capabilities, improved 4K video, then either the iPhone 11 or perhaps even its bigger brother, the iPhone 11 Pro, are well worth considering. Thumbs up if you want to see a full review of the iPhone 11 Pro. So what do you guys think? Have you purchased an iPhone 11 or do you plan on purchasing one in the near future? Let me know down below in the comments section. This is Jeff with 9to5Mac. Special thanks to our sponsor Kadabi, who makes the excellent, sleek, and minimalist design sheath case for iPhone 11. Click the link in the description to get 30% off Kadabi sheath with code 9to5toys2019.